The leather-bound diary lay half-buried in the dusty street of Ash Fork, Arizona Territory, its pages fluttering in the hot September wind like a wounded bird trying to take flight. Wade Dalton swung down from his horse, his boots hitting the ground with a soft thud as he bent to retrieve the book before the wheels of a passing wagon could crush it into oblivion. The year was 1883, and the small mining town nestled in the high desert had seen better days. But Wade had learned long ago that even the most worn-down places held treasures if you knew where to look. He brushed the red dust from the cover and noticed the delicate handwriting on the first page. Property of Scarlett Brennan. The name meant nothing to him, but the vulnerability of the words inside made his chest tighten with an unfamiliar feeling. He had only read the first line by accident, his eyes catching the script before he could stop himself. Today, I watched another family pack their belongings and leave Ash Fork. I wonder if I am a fool for staying. Wade closed the book immediately, feeling as though he had intruded on something sacred. The sun beat down mercilessly as he looked up and down the main street, trying to determine where the diary might have fallen from. A woman stood outside the general store, patting her skirts and searching the ground with growing distress. Her honey-colored hair was pulled back in a practical bun, though several strands had escaped to frame a face that was more interesting than conventionally beautiful. There was intelligence in her features, a sharpness to her green eyes that suggested she saw more than most people wanted to reveal. Wade walked toward her, the diary held carefully in his calloused hands. As he approached, she looked up, and their eyes met. For a moment, the chaos of the street seemed to fade into nothing. There were shouts from the saloon, the clang of the blacksmith's hammer, the rumble of ore carts being pulled toward the assayer's office, but Wade heard none of it. He saw only the way her expression shifted from worry to relief, and then to something more guarded. "I believe this belongs to you, miss," he said, extending the diary toward her. His voice was rougher than he intended, scraped raw by years of trail dust and long silences. Scarlett's hand flew to her throat, her eyes widening as she recognized her most private possession in the hands of a stranger. "Oh, thank goodness! I must have dropped it when I was loading supplies." She reached for it quickly, her fingers brushing against his for just a moment. The contact sent an unexpected jolt through Wade's arm. "Did you read any of it?" He could have lied. It would have been easier, but Wade had built what little honor he possessed on a foundation of hard truths. "Only the first line on the first page to find your name." I closed it as soon as I realized what it was. She studied his face, those sharp eyes searching for deception. Whatever she found there must have satisfied her, because her shoulders relaxed slightly. "Thank you for returning it. Many men would not have bothered." "Many men are fools," Wade said simply. He removed his hat, revealing sun-streaked brown hair that was a touch too long. "Wade Dalton. I just rode into town this morning. Scarlett Brennan. I run the boarding house on 2nd Street. She clutched the diary to her chest like a shield. "Are you looking for work in the mines?" "No, madam. I am a horse trader by profession, though I can turn my hand to most things when needed. I was hoping to do some business here before moving on to Flagstaff." Something flickered across Scarlett's face at the word moving. Disappointment, perhaps, though Wade could not fathom why. They had only just met. "I see. Well, Mr. Dalton, I hope you find Ash Fork profitable during your stay." She started to turn away, but Wade found himself speaking before he could think better of it. "Miss Brennan, if I may be bold, that line I read in your diary struck me as rather melancholy. I know it is none of my business, but are you all right?" Scarlett turned back, surprise evident on her face. "That is quite bold indeed, Mr. Dalton. But if you must know, yes, I am fine. Ash Fork is not what it once was, and many people are leaving to seek their fortunes elsewhere. It can be lonely watching a town fade away around you. Why do you stay? The question came out before Wade could stop it. Because someone needs to remember what this place was and bear witness to what it might become. Her chin lifted slightly, a gesture of defiance against the implied criticism. And because my parents are buried here, I promised my mother I would tend their graves. Wade felt something shift in his chest, a recognition of kindred spirits. He too knew what it meant to be bound by promises to the dead. That is a good reason. The best reason, perhaps. For the first time, Scarlett smiled, and Wade felt the full force of it like a physical blow. Her entire face transformed, becoming radiant despite the dust and heat. You are not what I expected when I saw you pick up my diary, Mr. Dalton. What did you expect? Someone rougher, perhaps, more interested in mocking a woman's private thoughts than in returning them safely. She adjusted her grip on the diary. I should get these supplies back to the boarding house. We have guests arriving on the afternoon stage. Wade watched her gather her parcels from where they sat outside the general store. Without thinking, he moved to help her. Allow me to carry these for you. It is the least I can do after invading your privacy, however accidentally. Scarlett hesitated, then nodded. Very well, but I warn you, the boarding house is a good walk from here, and you will have to endure my company the entire way. I find that prospect surprisingly pleasant, Miss Brennan. As they walked through the dusty streets of Ash Fork, Wade learned more about the woman beside him. Scarlett was 24 years old, the daughter of a mining engineer who had come to Arizona Territory with dreams of striking silver. Her father had found modest success, enough to build the boarding house and establish the family comfortably, before a cave-in at the mine had claimed his life 3 years earlier. Her mother had followed him 6 months later, victim to a fever that swept through the town that winter. I had a brother, Scarlett said as they passed a small cemetery on the outskirts of town. Daniel. He was older than me by 2 years. He died of cholera when I was 12. Papa never quite recovered from losing him. Wade carried the supplies easily, his strong arms making light work of the heavy parcels. I am sorry for your losses. That is a heavy burden for anyone to carry. And what of your family, Mr. Dalton? Surely you have some story of your own. He was quiet for a long moment, debating how much to reveal. But there was something about Scarlett that invited honesty. My mother died giving birth to me. My father was a cavalry officer who raised me on various frontier posts until I was old enough to fend for myself. He died 5 years ago fighting the Apache near Fort Apache. I was 20 when it happened. So you are 25 now, Scarlett said softly. We are close in age then, and both orphans for all that we are grown. It seems we have that in common. The boarding house appeared before them, a sturdy 2-story structure that had been painted white sometime in the distant past. The paint was peeling now, and the porch sagged slightly on one side, but Wade could see that it was well maintained despite its age. Flower boxes hung beneath the windows, filled with desert plants that somehow managed to bloom in defiance of the harsh climate. This is lovely, Wade said honestly. You keep it well. Scarlett's cheeks flushed with pleasure at the compliment. Thank you. It is hard work, especially since I run it alone, but it is mine. Papa left it to me free and clear, no debts or mortgages. As long as I can pay the taxes, I can stay here. They climbed the steps to the porch, and Scarlett pushed open the front door. The interior was dim and blessedly cool after the heat of the street. Wade followed her inside, setting the supplies down on a table in the front hall. The boarding house was simply furnished but clean, with curtains on the windows and rugs on the wooden floors. It smelled of beeswax polish and something baking in the kitchen. Thank you for your help, Mr. Dalton, Scarlett said, setting her diary down on the table beside the supplies. "Can I offer you some water before you go? It is a hot day." Wade knew he should leave. He had business to attend to, horses to sell, arrangements to make. But the thought of walking back out into the blazing sun and away from Scarlett's company held little appeal. "That would be most welcome, thank you." She led him through to the kitchen at the back of the house, where a pump stood beside a deep sink. Scarlett worked the handle and cool water gushed out into a tin cup. She handed it to Wade and he drank deeply, grateful for the refreshment. "You have rooms available." The question surprised him as much as it seemed to surprise her. "For a guest, I mean. I need somewhere to stay while I am in Ash Fork." Scarlett's eyes lit up, though she tried to hide it. "I do, actually. I have 3 rooms for rent. One is occupied by a surveyor who is mapping the territory for the railroad. The other 2 are empty. The rate is $2 a week, including breakfast and supper." "That seems more than fair. I will take one of them if you will have me." "Of course." Scarlett's professional demeanor slipped back into place, though Wade could see the pleasure in her eyes. "Let me show you upstairs." The room she led him to was at the front of the house, with a window that overlooked the street. It held a narrow bed, a washstand, a chair, and a small wardrobe. Nothing fancy, but it was clean and the bed looked comfortable. Wade had slept in far worse places. "This will do nicely, Miss Brennan. Thank you." "Supper is at 6 o'clock, Scarlett said from the doorway. "If you need anything, my room is downstairs behind the kitchen." After she left, Wade sat on the edge of the bed and removed his hat, running his fingers through his hair. He had not planned to stay in Ash Fork for more than a day or 2, just long enough to sell a few horses and resupply before moving on. But something had changed the moment he picked up that diary in the dust. Or perhaps it had changed when he looked into Scarlett's eyes and saw the loneliness there that matched his own. He rose and went to the window, looking out at the dusty street below. Ash Fork might be fading, but it was not dead yet. And neither was he, despite the years he had spent drifting from town to town with no real purpose beyond survival. Maybe it was time to stop moving. Maybe it was time to put down roots, however tentatively. But first, he needed to understand what had drawn him to Scarlett so quickly and so powerfully. It was more than her beauty, though she was certainly attractive in her own way. It was the strength he sensed in her, the determination to hold on to something meaningful in a world that seemed determined to sweep everything away. It was the sadness in her eyes that she tried to hide, and the hope that still flickered there despite everything. Wade unpacked his few belongings and changed his shirt, washing the trail dust from his face and hands at the basin. When he descended the stairs at 6 o'clock, he found the dining room set for 3. Scarlett emerged from the kitchen carrying a platter of roasted chicken, and the surveyor was already seated at the table. "Mr. Dalton, this is Mr. Horace Pemberton," Scarlett said, making introductions. "Mr. Pemberton, Wade Dalton. He will be staying with us for a while." Pemberton was a thin man in his 40s with spectacles and ink-stained fingers. He nodded at Wade politely. "Pleased to meet you, Dalton. What brings you to Ash Fork?" "Horse trading," Wade replied, taking the seat that Scarlett indicated. "And you?" "Surveying for the Atlantic and Pacific Railroad. They are planning an expansion through this territory, and I am mapping the most efficient routes." Pemberton launched into a detailed explanation of railroad engineering that Wade only half listened to, his attention drawn instead to Scarlett as she moved between the dining room and kitchen, bringing out dishes of vegetables and fresh bread. The meal was simple but delicious. Scarlett was an excellent cook, and Wade told her so, earning another of those transformative smiles. They talked as they ate, the conversation flowing easily despite being relative strangers. Pemberton dominated much of the discussion with talk of his work, but Wade noticed how Scarlett gently steered the topic to include all of them, drawing Wade out about his horses and his travels. "Have you always been a horse trader?" she asked, passing him the bread basket. "Not always. I grew up on cavalry posts, as I mentioned, so I learned about horses from an early age. After my father died, I worked on a ranch in New Mexico for a time, then as a scout for a freight company. But I found I preferred the freedom of working for myself, so I bought a few good horses and began trading." "You bred them yourself?" "Sometimes. I have a good eye for bloodlines, and I know which horses will thrive in desert country versus mountain territory. Mostly I buy horses that others have not seen the value in and train them properly before selling them on." Scarlett leaned forward, genuinely interested. "That sounds like skilled work. How do you know which horses have potential?" Wade found himself warming to the topic, explaining the finer points of conformation and temperament. He was not used to people taking such interest in his profession. Most saw horse trading as beneath their notice, or simply a means to an end. But Scarlett asked intelligent questions and listened to his answers with real attention. After supper, Pemberton excused himself to work on his maps, leaving Wade and Scarlett alone in the dining room. Wade helped her clear the table, ignoring her protests that guests should not work. "I am not much of a guest," he said, carrying plates to the kitchen. "More of a tenant, and I was raised to help with chores. Your father trained you well then." "He did his best, given the circumstances. It could not have been easy raising a child alone on the frontier." Scarlett began washing the dishes, and Wade picked up a towel to dry them. They worked in companionable silence for a while before Scarlett spoke again. "May I ask you something, Mr. Dalton?" "Of course. And please call me Wade. We are living under the same roof after all." Formality seems unnecessary. "Very well, Wade." She said his name carefully as if testing how it felt. "What made you stop to pick up my diary? Most people would have walked right past it." Wade considered the question as he dried a plate. "Honestly, I am not entirely sure. Maybe it was because I have lost things myself and know how it feels. Or maybe it was because something told me it was important. Not just the diary itself, but the act of returning it. You have a kind heart, I think." "I have been called many things, Miss Brennan, but kind is not usually among them." "Scarlett," she corrected gently. "If I am to call you Wade, then you must call me Scarlett." "Scarlett." He liked the way her name sounded, the way it conjured images of sunset and fire. "It suits you." She looked at him curiously. "Why do you say that?" "Because you are fierce, I think. You hold on to what matters even when it would be easier to let go. That takes fire." Scarlett was quiet for a long moment, her hands stilling in the wash water. "No one has ever described me that way before. Most people think I am stubborn or foolish for staying here. There is nothing foolish about honoring your commitments. The world needs more people who understand that." They finished the dishes together, and Scarlett made tea which they drank on the back porch, watching the sun set over the distant mountains. The sky turned brilliant shades of orange and pink, the colors so vivid they seemed almost unreal. "This is my favorite time of day," Scarlett said softly. "When the heat finally breaks and the world becomes beautiful again." Wade sipped his tea, studying her profile in the fading light. "I can see why. It is quite a view." She glanced at him and caught him looking at her rather than the sunset. A faint blush colored her cheeks, but she did not look away. "Wade, can I ask you something else? Anything? That question you asked me earlier about why I stay in Ash Fork. Why did you want to know?" He set down his cup, choosing his words carefully. "Because I have been drifting for 5 years. moving from place to place with no real destination in mind. I suppose I was curious about what it feels like to have roots, to belong somewhere so completely that you would stay even when leaving might be easier. You want that, to belong somewhere. I did not think I did, but lately I have been wondering if maybe I was wrong. Scarlett turned to face him fully. What changed? Wade met her eyes, those sharp green eyes that saw too much. Honestly, I am not sure yet. Maybe I will know when I figure out why I could not walk past your diary without stopping. The moment stretched between them, charged with something Wade could not quite name. It was attraction, certainly, but it was more than that. It was recognition, connection, the sense that they were two puzzle pieces that had been wandering separately and had suddenly discovered they might fit together. Scarlett broke the silence first. I should confess something. When you asked if you could read my diary back on the street, I was terrified of what you might think if you saw what I had written. I would never presume to read your private thoughts without permission. I know. That is what makes this so strange. She hesitated, then continued. I find myself wanting to share those thoughts with you. Not all of them, not yet, but some of them. Wade's heart began to beat faster. I would be honored to hear anything you want to tell me. I write about loneliness mostly. About what it feels like to watch people leave while you stay behind. About wondering if I made the right choice staying here. About hoping that someday someone will come along who sees value in this place and in me and will want to stay. The vulnerability in her voice made Wade want to reach for her hand, but he held himself back. They had only just met. Moving too quickly might frighten her away. You chose to stay for the right reasons, Scarlett. That shows character and loyalty. Anyone who cannot see the value in that is a fool. You barely know me. How can you be so certain? Because I know what it looks like when someone is running away from something, and I know what it looks like when someone is standing for something. You are standing. That matters. Scarlett's eyes glistened in the twilight. Thank you. You have no idea how much I needed to hear that. They sat together in the gathering darkness, talking about everything and nothing. Wade told her about the places he had been, the horses he had trained, the vast empty spaces he had crossed. Scarlett told him about growing up in Ash Fork, about her father's dreams and her mother's strength, about the difficult years after they died. I had to learn to run this place on my own, she said. Papa had hired help before the accident, but I could not afford to keep them on. So I taught myself to cook and clean and manage accounts. Some of the men in town did not think I could do it. Some still do not. But you proved them wrong. Every single day. There was pride in her voice now, and Wade was glad to hear it. The boarding house may not look like much, but it is mine, and I have kept it running for 3 years against all odds. That is more than most people could say. By the time they went inside, the stars were bright overhead and a cool breeze had begun to blow down from the mountains. Wade climbed the stairs to his room feeling more alive than he had in years. He lay in bed with his hands behind his head, staring at the ceiling and thinking about Scarlett Brennan and her diary, and the way her smile transformed her face. He had come to Ash Fork expecting to stay a day or two at most. But now, lying in the darkness of his rented room, Wade found himself hoping that his business in town would take much longer than planned. Because for the first time since his father's death, he had met someone who made him want to stop moving. Someone who made him wonder what it would be like to have a home. Over the next few days, Wade settled into a routine. He spent his mornings tending to his horses, which he kept in a corral on the edge of town, and his afternoons exploring Ash Fork and meeting potential buyers. The town was indeed struggling, but there were still ranchers and freighters who needed good animals, and Wade's reputation for fair dealing preceded him. But the best part of each day was always the evening, when he would return to the boarding house and find Scarlett in the kitchen preparing supper. He took to helping her with whatever tasks needed doing, and she accepted his assistance with growing comfort. They talked as they worked, sharing stories and opinions on everything from politics to literature to the best way to make biscuits. Wade learned that Scarlett was well-read, her father having encouraged her education in a way that was unusual for the time. She had opinions on matters that most men thought women should not concern themselves with, and she was not afraid to express them. This delighted Wade, who had always found conventional women rather dull. "What do you think about women's suffrage?" Scarlett asked him one evening as they peeled potatoes together. Wade considered the question seriously. "I think if women are expected to follow laws and pay taxes, they should have a say in making those laws and deciding how their taxes are spent. Seems only fair." Scarlett's knife stilled. "You really believe that? Why would I not? My mother died before I could know her, but my father always spoke of her as his equal in mind and spirit. He said she was the smartest person he ever met. If she had lived, I imagine she would have had much to say about how this country is run." "I wish more men thought as you do," Scarlett resumed peeling with renewed vigor. "Most of the men in Ash Fork think I am overstepping my place by running a business alone. They tolerate it because I am a widow of sorts and because I have no male relatives to take over, but they do not respect it. Then they are fools, as I have said before. You have accomplished more than most of them ever will." These conversations deepened the connection growing between them. Wade found himself looking for excuses to spend time with Scarlett, and he suspected she was doing the same. She began inviting him on small errands into town, ostensibly because she needed help carrying things, though Wade noticed the parcels were rarely very heavy. He did not mind. Any excuse to walk beside her and hear her voice was welcome. One afternoon, Scarlett asked if he would accompany her to the cemetery to tend her parents' graves. "You do not have to if you would rather not," she said quickly. "I know it is a gloomy task." "I would be honored," Wade replied honestly. "I visit my father's grave whenever I pass near Fort Apache. I know it helps to have company sometimes." They walked to the small cemetery on the edge of town, carrying buckets of water and fresh flowers that Scarlett had bought from the Mexican woman who grew them in her garden. The graves were well tended, with simple headstones that bore her parents' names and dates. Thomas Brennan, beloved husband and father. Margaret Brennan, devoted wife and mother. Scarlett knelt to pull weeds from around the stones while Wade poured fresh water on the dust-dry ground. They worked in silence for a while, the only sounds the whisper of wind through the scattered trees and the distant sounds of the town. "I talk to them sometimes," Scarlett said quietly. "I know they cannot hear me, but it makes me feel less alone." "What do you tell them?" "About the boarding house mostly, about how I am managing, about the people who pass through." She sat back on her heels, brushing dirt from her hands. "I told them about you yesterday." Wade's heart skipped. "What did you say?" "That a kind man found my diary and returned it. That he is staying at the boarding house and helps me with chores without being asked. That he makes me laugh and treats me as if my opinions matter." She looked up at him, vulnerable and brave at the same time. "That I hope he stays in Ash Fork for a while." Wade set down the water bucket and moved to kneel beside her. "Scarlett, I need to tell you something." "What is it?" "When I first rode into town, I was planning to stay only a day or two, but that was before I met you. Now I find myself inventing reasons to extend my visit. I have business I could be conducting elsewhere, but I keep putting it off because I do not want to leave." Her eyes searched his face. "Why?" "Because I have never met anyone like you. Because talking to you feels like the most natural thing in the world. Because when I imagine riding away from Ash Fork, I feel a sense of loss I cannot explain." He reached for her hand, giving her time to pull away if she wanted to. She did not. I know we have not known each other long, but I think I am falling in love with you, Scarlett Brennan. And I wanted you to know. Scarlett's breath caught. For a long moment she just looked at him, her green eyes wide and shining. Then she squeezed his hand. I think I am falling in love with you too, Wade Dalton, and it terrifies me. Why does it terrify you? Because everyone I have ever loved has left me one way or another. Because I am afraid that if I let myself love you, you will leave too. Not because you want to, but because life will take you away. And I do not think I could bear losing someone else. Wade lifted her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles gently. I cannot promise that nothing bad will ever happen. Life does not work that way, as you know better than most. But I can promise that I will not leave you by choice. If you will have me, I want to stay in Ash Fork. I want to build a life here with you. You would give up your traveling, your freedom. What good is freedom if you are alone? What good is seeing the world if you have no one to share it with? He cupped her face with his free hand, his thumb brushing her cheek. I have been searching for something for 5 years, Scarlett. I did not know what it was until I found your diary in the dust. But now I understand. I was searching for a reason to stop moving, a reason to care about something again. A home. Tears spilled down Scarlett's cheeks, but she was smiling. Are you saying I am your home? If you will have me, yes. You and this struggling little town and that boarding house with the peeling paint, all of it. I want all of it. She laughed through her tears and leaned forward until their foreheads touched. Then stay. Please stay. I have been alone for so long, and I am so tired of being strong all by myself. You will never have to be alone again, I swear it. They knelt there in the cemetery for a long time, holding each other while the sun beat down and the wind whispered through the mesquite trees. When they finally stood to leave, Wade kept his arm around Scarlett's waist, and she leaned into him as if she had been doing it all her life. That evening at supper, there was a new ease between them. Pemberton, the surveyor, noticed and smiled knowingly, but said nothing. After the meal, Scarlett asked Wade if he would like to sit with her on the front porch, and of course he agreed. They sat on the old porch swing, which creaked gently as they rocked. Scarlett had brought her diary with her, and Wade looked at it curiously. Would you like to read it? She asked. Wade was surprised. Are you certain? Your private thoughts should remain private if you wish. I do wish it. But I also want you to understand me fully. The real me, not just the capable woman who runs a boarding house and acts strong all the time. I want you to see the parts of me that are scared and lonely and sometimes unsure. Those parts do not make you weak, Scarlett. They make you human. Maybe. But I still want you to see them. She handed him the diary. You do not have to read it all at once, but I give you permission to read whatever you want, whenever you want. Wade took the diary carefully, as if it were made of glass. This is a great gift. I will treat it with the respect it deserves. Over the next several days, Wade read Scarlett's diary in the quiet moments between his work with the horses. He read about her grief after her father's death, the overwhelming responsibility of taking over the boarding house, the loneliness of being surrounded by strangers who came and went without truly seeing her. He read about her fears that she was wasting her life in a dying town, and her equally strong conviction that leaving would mean abandoning everything her family had built. But he also read about moments of joy. The first time a guest complimented her cooking. The satisfaction of balancing the books and realizing she had made a small profit. The sunset evenings when the world seemed full of possibility. The diary painted a picture of a woman who refused to give up hope, even when hope seemed foolish. One entry in particular caught Wade's attention. It was dated 2 weeks before he arrived in Ash Fork. I dreamed last night that someone came to town who saw me, really saw me, and wanted to stay. I woke up feeling more lonely than ever because I know it is just a dream. Men like that do not exist, and even if they did, they would not choose a struggling boarding house in a dying town. They would not choose me. Wade closed the diary and sat for a long time with it in his hands. Then he found Scarlett in the kitchen, where she was kneading bread dough. She looked up as he entered, flour dusting her cheeks and forearms. "Wade, is something wrong?" He set the diary down on the table and moved to stand in front of her. "Do you remember what you wrote 2 weeks ago about dreaming of someone who would see you and stay?" She flushed, her hands stilling in the dough. "You read that far already." "I did. And I need you to understand something, Scarlett. That man you dreamed of, he does exist. I am here. I see you. And I am not going anywhere." Scarlett's eyes filled with tears again. She wiped her hands on her apron and reached for him, pulling him into a fierce embrace. Wade wrapped his arms around her and held her close, feeling her heart beat against his chest. "I was so afraid," she whispered against his shoulder. "So afraid that I had imagined this, that it was not real." "It is real. I am real. This is real." He pulled back just enough to look into her eyes. "Scarlett, I want to ask you something, and I want you to think about it carefully before answering." "What is it?" "I want to court you properly. I want everyone in Ash Fork to know that I am serious about you, about us. I want to build a life here, but I want to build it the right way. Will you allow me to court you?" Joy spread across Scarlett's face like sunrise. "Yes. Yes, Wade, I will." He kissed her then, gently and reverently, tasting flour and salt and happiness. It was a first kiss, tentative and sweet, but it promised many more to come. When they finally drew apart, both were smiling. "I should finish this bread," Scarlett said, though she made no move to step away from him. "And I should let you work." Wade brushed a strand of hair from her face. "But I am finding it very difficult to leave this kitchen." "Then stay. You can help me shape the loaves." So Wade stayed, and they worked together in comfortable harmony, talking and laughing and stealing occasional kisses when the mood struck them. It was domestic and ordinary and absolutely perfect. News of their courtship spread through Ash Fork with surprising speed. Some people were pleased for Scarlett, happy to see her find companionship after so many years alone. Others were more skeptical, questioning whether a drifter like Wade could really be serious about settling down. Wade did his best to prove the doubters wrong. He sold most of his horses to ranchers in the area, keeping only 2 for himself and Scarlett. He bought a small piece of land on the edge of town and began building a stable, planning to establish a proper horse trading and training business. He attended church with Scarlett on Sundays and made himself useful around town, helping neighbors with various tasks and making a point of being reliable. But mostly, he spent time with Scarlett. They took walks in the cool evenings, exploring the hills around Ash Fork and watching the spectacular sunsets. They talked endlessly, discovering each other's thoughts and dreams and fears. Wade told her about his childhood on cavalry posts, the constant moving, the way his father had tried to be both mother and father and had mostly succeeded. Scarlett told him about her brother Daniel, how his death had cast a shadow over their family that never quite lifted. "Mama was never the same after we lost him," Scarlett said one evening as they sat on a hillside overlooking the town. "She loved me. I never doubted that, but part of her was always somewhere else, with the son she had lost. That must have been hard for you. Sometimes. But I understood. Losing a child is not something you recover from, I imagine. You just learn to carry the weight." Wade took her hand. "For what it is worth, I think your parents would be proud of you, of what you have accomplished and who you have become." Scarlett leaned her head on his shoulder. "I hope so. I try to live in a way that would honor their memory." "You do. Trust me, you do." As the weeks passed, Wade and Scarlett's relationship deepened. They were rarely apart, and the whole town began to accept them as a couple. Wade continued to read Scarlett's diary with her permission, and sometimes she would read entries aloud to him, sharing her innermost thoughts. In return, Wade shared his own struggles and fears, the guilt he carried over his mother's death in childbirth, the complicated relationship with his father, the years of aimless drifting. "You regret those years?" Scarlett asked one night as they sat on the boarding house porch. Wade considered the question. "No. I think I needed that time to become the person I am now. If I had met you 5 years ago, I would not have been ready. I would have been too raw, too angry at the world. But now I am ready to build something instead of just survive. I am glad you found your way here, to Ash Fork, to me." "So am I, love, so am I." The endearment had slipped out naturally, and Scarlett's smile in response told Wade it had been well received. They were falling deeper in love with each passing day, and Wade knew it was only a matter of time before he asked the question that had been building in his heart. One October evening, when the air had finally cooled and the leaves on the few deciduous trees were beginning to turn, Wade invited Scarlett for a ride. He saddled the 2 horses he had kept, both gentle and well-trained, and helped Scarlett mount. They rode out of town toward the hills, following a path that Wade had scouted earlier. "Where are we going?" Scarlett asked, laughing as her horse pranced beneath her. "You will see. Trust me." They rode for about an hour, climbing into the foothills until they reached a small plateau that overlooked the entire valley. The view was spectacular, with Ash Fork laid out below them like a child's toy town, and the mountains rising in purple majesty beyond. Wade had brought a blanket and some food, and he spread them out beneath a large juniper tree. "This is beautiful," Scarlett breathed, turning in a slow circle to take it all in. "How did you find this place?" "I have been exploring the area, looking for good grazing land for horses. I found this spot last week and knew I had to bring you here." They sat on the blanket and ate the simple meal Wade had packed, watching as the sun began its slow descent toward the horizon. The sky turned brilliant shades of orange, pink, and purple, more vivid than any painting. When the meal was finished and the sun was just touching the mountains, Wade turned to Scarlett and took both her hands in his. "Scarlett, do you remember the day we met, when I found your diary in the dust? Of course. How could I forget? That day changed my life. I did not know it then, but picking up that diary was the single most important thing I have ever done, because it led me to you." Scarlett's eyes were shining in the sunset light. "It changed my life too." Wade reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. Scarlett's breath caught as he opened it to reveal a simple gold ring with a small sapphire set in the center. It was not fancy, but it was beautiful in its simplicity. "This was my mother's," Wade said softly. "The only thing of hers that my father kept. He gave it to me before he died and told me to give it to the woman I wanted to spend my life with." He looked into Scarlett's eyes, his voice steady despite the emotion churning inside him. "Scarlett Brennan, you are the bravest, strongest, kindest woman I have ever known. You make me want to be a better man. You make me believe in the future again. Will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life loving you and building a home with you here in Ash Fork?" Tears were streaming down Scarlett's face, but she was smiling broader than Wade had ever seen. "Yes. Yes, Wade, I will marry you. I love you so much." Wade slipped the ring onto her finger and it fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her. Then he pulled her into his arms and kissed her deeply, pouring all his love and hope and joy into that kiss. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard and grinning like fools. "I cannot believe this is real," Scarlett said, looking at the ring on her finger in wonder. 2 months ago I was alone, wondering if I would spend the rest of my life that way. And now I am engaged to the most wonderful man I have ever met. 2 months ago I was drifting, thinking I would never find a place to call home. And now I am engaged to a woman who is my home, no matter where we are. They stayed on the plateau until the stars came out, making plans for their future. They would marry before the end of the year, a simple ceremony at the little church in town. Wade would finish building the stable and establish his horse trading business. Scarlett would continue running the boarding house, at least for now, though they talked about eventually buying a ranch where they could raise horses and maybe children if they were blessed. "How many children do you want?" Scarlett asked, nestled against Wade's chest as they looked up at the stars. "However many we are blessed with. 2, 4, 6. It does not matter as long as they are half as wonderful as their mother. You cannot possibly know that I will be a good mother. I know you are kind and patient and strong. I know you honor your commitments and love deeply. That is everything a good mother needs." Scarlett turned in his arms to look at him. "You will be a wonderful father. You are already the best man I know." They rode back to Ash Fork in the darkness, their horses picking their way carefully down the trail. When they reached the boarding house, Wade helped Scarlett dismount and walked her to the door. Even though they were engaged, propriety still mattered, and they would not share a room until they were married. "I do not want to leave you," Wade murmured, holding her close on the porch. "Then do not go far. Just up the stairs to your room where you belong until we are married." "You are right, of course, but that does not make it any easier." They kissed goodnight, a long, sweet kiss that promised forever. Then Wade reluctantly released her and climbed the stairs to his room while Scarlett went to hers behind the kitchen. Despite being separated by floors and walls, they both fell asleep happy, thinking of the life they would build together. The next few weeks were a flurry of activity. Scarlett and Wade announced their engagement, and most of the town was thrilled for them. A few of the old gossips clucked about the speed of the courtship, but Scarlett did not care. She knew her own heart, and she knew Wade's. They planned a wedding for the first Saturday in December. It would be a simple affair, with just the townspeople who wanted to attend and a reception at the boarding house afterward. Scarlett sewed herself a new dress, a beautiful dark blue that brought out her eyes. Wade bought a new suit and had his boots polished until they shone. Pemberton, the surveyor, agreed to stand up for Wade, having witnessed their courtship from the beginning. Mrs. Chen, the Mexican woman who grew flowers, agreed to stand up for Scarlett. The church was decorated with what flowers could be found in the late autumn, and Scarlett baked enough food for the entire town. The night before the wedding, Wade presented Scarlett with a gift. It was a new diary, bound in fine leather with her soon-to-be name embossed on the cover. "Scarlett Wade Dalton. I thought you might want a fresh start," Wade said as she opened it with trembling fingers. "A new diary for your new life." Scarlett opened the first page and found that Wade had written something there in his neat hand, "To my beloved wife. May these pages hold only joy, adventure, and love. May we fill them together with the story of our life. Your devoted husband, Wade." "You dated it tomorrow," Scarlett said softly, tracing the words with her finger. "Because tomorrow we begin our forever." She looked up at him with tears in her eyes. "This is the most thoughtful gift anyone has ever given me. Thank you. Thank you for agreeing to marry me. Thank you for taking a chance on a drifter with nothing but a few horses and a dream. You were never just a drifter, Wade. You were the answer to my prayers. You just did not know it yet." The wedding day dawned clear and cool, perfect weather for a December day in Arizona territory. Scarlett woke early and spent time writing in her new diary, recording her thoughts and feelings on this momentous day. She wrote about her nervousness and excitement, about the life she was leaving behind as a single woman, and the life she was beginning as Wade's wife. But mostly she wrote about love, about how Wade had changed everything by stopping to pick up her old diary in the dust, about how his kindness and strength had broken through the walls she had built around her heart, about how she had gone from being alone to being loved in the space of just a few months. When it was time to get ready, Mrs. Chen came to help her with her hair and dress. The older woman had become something of a friend to Scarlett over the years, and she smiled as she pinned up Scarlett's honey-colored hair. "You are glowing, child. Love suits you." "Thank you, Mrs. Chen. I can hardly believe this is really happening." "Believe it. That man loves you with his whole heart. I can see it every time he looks at you." At the church, Wade waited at the altar with Pemberton beside him. He wore his new suit and looked more handsome than Scarlett had ever seen him. When she walked down the aisle on her own, having no father to give her away, Wade's eyes filled with tears. She was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. They spoke their vows in steady voices, promising to love and cherish each other for all the days of their lives. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Wade kissed Scarlett tenderly, and the small congregation erupted in applause. The reception at the boarding house was lively and joyful. People ate and drank and danced to music provided by a few townspeople with instruments. Wade and Scarlett moved through the crowd together, thanking everyone for coming and basking in the happiness of the day. As evening fell and the guests began to depart, Wade and Scarlett found themselves alone on the front porch of the boarding house. Their boarding house now, Wade realized. Their home. "How do you feel, Mrs. Dalton?" Wade asked, pulling Scarlett close. "Like the luckiest woman in the world, Mr. Dalton. The feeling is entirely mutual, I assure you." They stood together watching the stars come out, neither quite ready to go inside and end this perfect day. Finally, Scarlett stirred in Wade's arms. "Take me upstairs, husband. We have a whole life to start living." Wade smiled and scooped her up in his arms, making her laugh as he carried her across the threshold and up the stairs to what was now their shared room. He had moved his things in earlier, combining his few possessions with hers. It was a small space, but it was theirs, and that made it perfect. As Wade set Scarlett on her feet beside their bed, she reached up and cupped his face in her hands. "I love you, Wade Dalton. Thank you for finding my diary. Thank you for returning it, and thank you for asking to be part of my story." Wade's breath caught as he realized what she had said. "Is that how you think of it? Me asking to be part of your story? Is it not? You could have walked away after returning the diary. But you stayed. You asked to rent a room, and then you asked if you could help with chores, and then you asked if you could court me, and finally you asked me to marry you. At every step, you were asking to be part of my story, and every time I said yes." Wade felt emotion swell in his chest, threatening to overwhelm him. "That is the most beautiful way anyone has ever described what we have, and you are right. I did ask to be part of your story, but you need to understand something, Scarlett. You are not just letting me be part of your story. You are part of mine now, too. We are writing this story together, and it is going to be the greatest adventure either of us has ever had. I cannot wait to see where it takes us." They came together then, husband and wife, beginning the intimate part of their marriage with tenderness and love. The moon rose outside their window, and the world continued on, but for Wade and Scarlett, nothing existed except each other and the love they shared. The months that followed were a time of building and growing. Wade's horse trading business flourished as word spread about his skill and honesty. Ranchers from miles around came to buy horses from him, and he developed a reputation for being able to train even the most difficult animals. The stable he had built expanded, and eventually he hired a young man from town to help him with the work. Scarlett continued running the boarding house, though now she had Wade to help with the heavier tasks. They made improvements to the building, fixing the sagging porch and painting the exterior a fresh white. Business picked up as travelers heard about the clean rooms and excellent food, and Scarlett found herself often fully booked. But the best news came in late spring, when Scarlett realized she was pregnant. She told Wade one evening as they sat on their newly repaired porch, and he was so overcome with joy that he actually whooped and spun her around in his arms. "Careful," she laughed, steadying herself against him. "You will make me dizzy." "I am sorry, I am just so happy. A baby. We are going to have a baby." He placed his hand gently on her still flat stomach. "Hello in there, little one. This is your father speaking. I love you already, and I promise to do everything in my power to give you a good life." Scarlett's eyes filled with tears. "You are going to be such a wonderful father. And you will be an amazing mother. Our child is blessed to have you." Throughout the pregnancy, Wade was attentive and loving, doing everything he could to make sure Scarlett was comfortable. He took over more of the work at the boarding house, insisting that she rest as much as possible. When she protested that she was not an invalid, he kissed her forehead and said he knew that, but he liked taking care of her. "You have spent so many years taking care of everyone else," he said. "Let me take care of you for a change." On a cold January day in 1885, Scarlett went into labor. Mrs. Chen served as midwife, having delivered many babies in her years in Ash Fork. Wade stayed by Scarlett's side throughout, holding her hand and murmuring encouragement even when she squeezed his hand hard enough to hurt. After hours of labor, their son was born, red-faced and squalling with healthy lungs. Wade cut the cord with shaking hands, then held his son for the first time, tears streaming down his face. "He is perfect," he whispered. "Absolutely perfect." "What should we name him?" Scarlett asked, exhausted but radiant. Wade looked down at the tiny face of his son, thinking of the past and the future, of promises kept and new beginnings. "Thomas, after your father, and his middle name can be Daniel after your brother, if that is all right with you." Scarlett's face crumpled, and she nodded through her tears. "Thomas Daniel Dalton. It is perfect. Papa and Daniel would be so honored." They had 2 more children over the next few years. A daughter they named Margaret Rose, after Scarlett's mother, and then another son they called Henry James, after Wade's father, whose middle name had been James. Each child was loved fiercely by both parents, and each added new joy to the growing family. The boarding house thrived, and eventually Wade and Scarlett were able to buy a small ranch on the outskirts of town, just as they had dreamed. But Scarlett insisted on keeping the boarding house running, hiring staff to manage it while she and Wade focused on the ranch and their children. "That house represents my family's legacy," she said when Wade suggested they might sell it. "I cannot give it up. It is where my parents built their life and where we began ours." "Then we will keep it," Wade agreed immediately. "I understand about honoring the past while building the future." As the years passed, Ash Fork stabilized and even began to grow again, thanks in part to the railroad expansion that Pemberton had been surveying. Wade and Scarlett became pillars of the community, known for their kindness and their strong marriage. Young couples often sought their advice, and Scarlett smiled every time, thinking about how it had all started with a diary in the dust. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Wade gave Scarlett a leather-bound book. She opened it curiously and found that he had compiled all of her diary entries from before they met, along with new entries from both of them over the years of their marriage. "I thought our children should know the whole story someday," Wade said. How their mother was brave enough to stay in a dying town because she believed in keeping promises. How their father was lost until he found a diary in the dust and decided to return it. How two lonely people found each other and built a life together. Scarlett traced the pages with her fingers, reading entries from years past. She saw her younger self's loneliness and fear, but also her strength and hope. And then she saw the change that came after Wade entered her life, how the tone of the entries shifted from lonely to loved, from uncertain to secure. "This is the most precious gift you could have given me," she said, clutching the book to her chest. "Our story preserved forever." "Not forever," Wade corrected gently. "Just until we pass it on to our children and they pass it on to theirs. That way we will be remembered not just for what we did, but for how we loved." They sat together on the porch of their ranch house, watching their children play in the yard. Thomas, now 9 years old, was teaching his sister Margaret how to ride a gentle mare. Henry, just 4, was trying to climb the fence to join them. It was chaotic and beautiful and more than either Wade or Scarlett had ever dared to dream. "You ever regret staying in Ash Fork?" Wade asked, though he knew the answer. "Never. Not for a single moment. This place gave me you and you gave me everything." "I was going to ask you the same question. Do you regret stopping to pick up a diary in the dust?" Scarlett laughed and leaned her head on his shoulder. "That diary changed my life, Wade. Losing it in the street was the best accident that ever happened to me." "Not an accident," Wade said thoughtfully. "Fate, maybe, or providence, or just two lost souls finding their way to each other against all odds. Whatever it was, I am grateful for it every day." As the sun set over the Arizona desert, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink, Wade and Scarlett sat in comfortable silence, watching their children and thinking about the journey that had brought them here. From loneliness to love, from drifting to belonging, from two separate stories to one shared tale, years continued to pass, bringing changes and challenges but also growth and joy. The children grew up strong and happy, knowing they were deeply loved by both parents. Thomas inherited Wade's way with horses and eventually took over much of the ranch work. Margaret had her mother's sharp mind and head for business, helping to expand the boarding house into a proper hotel. Henry, the youngest, became a teacher, drawn to books and learning in a way his older siblings were not. Wade and Scarlett grew older together, their love deepening with each passing year rather than fading. They held hands while walking through town, still drew curious looks from newcomers who were charmed by the obvious affection between them. They took evening rides together when they could, recreating that first ride to the plateau where Wade had proposed. On their 20th anniversary, their children surprised them by organizing a party that half the town attended. People gave speeches about how Wade and Scarlett had helped them over the years, how their example of love and commitment had inspired others, how their kindness had made Ash Fork a better place. Wade was overwhelmed by the outpouring of affection. He had spent so many years alone, feeling like he did not belong anywhere, that the idea of being important to an entire community still sometimes took him by surprise. But Scarlett just smiled and squeezed his hand, as if she had known all along that this was where he was meant to be. "You belong here," she whispered during one of the speeches. "You always did. You just needed to find your way home." As they danced together later that evening, Wade held Scarlett close and marveled at how one small act of kindness had led to an entire lifetime of love. Picking up that diary, returning it, and daring to ask if he could be part of her story had been the bravest thing he had ever done. And Scarlett saying yes had been the greatest gift he had ever received. "What are you thinking about?" Scarlett asked, noticing the faraway look in his eyes. "How lucky I am. How different my life would be if I had ridden past your diary that day without stopping. But you did not ride past. You stopped. You have never been the kind of man who rides past someone in need. Maybe. Or maybe I stopped because something in me recognized that my future was lying in that dust, waiting for me to find it. Scarlett smiled and rested her head on his chest as they swayed to the music. Either way, I am glad you stopped, and I am glad you asked to be part of my story. Our story, Wade corrected. It stopped being just your story the moment I picked up that diary. It became our story, and it has been the greatest story I could have imagined. They continued to dance, surrounded by their children and grandchildren. Yes, by then grandchildren had arrived. Thomas had married and had children of his own, and Margaret was engaged to a young lawyer from Flagstaff. Even Henry, not yet married, had brought a young woman to the party whom he clearly adored. The family was growing, branching out, becoming something bigger than just Wade and Scarlett. But at the center of it all was the love story that had started with a diary in the dust. A love story about two lonely people who had found each other against all odds and built a life together that was richer than anything either had dared to imagine. As the years continued to pass and Wade and Scarlett grew old together, they never lost the connection that had formed that first day. They still talked for hours, still held hands, still looked at each other with the same love and wonder they had felt as newlyweds. Their bodies aged, their hair turned gray, their steps slowed. But their love only grew stronger on quiet evenings. They would sit together and read through the diary Wade had compiled, remembering their journey. Scarlett would point out entries from before they met and marvel at how lost she had been. Wade would read his own additions to the diary and shake his head at how close he had come to riding right past Ash Fork without stopping. "We almost missed each other," Scarlett said one evening, her voice quavering slightly with age. "If you had ridden through town one day earlier or later, if I had not dropped my diary, if you had not been the kind of man who stops to help. But I did stop, and we did not miss each other. We found each other exactly when we were meant to." Wade kissed her forehead gently. "I believe we were always meant to find each other, Scarlett. The diary in the dust was just fate's way of making sure we did not miss our chance." On the 50th anniversary of the day Wade had first found Scarlett's diary, the entire family gathered at the ranch. Children, grandchildren, and even a few great-grandchildren filled the house and yard. 3 generations that existed because 2 people had been brave enough to take a chance on love. Wade and Scarlett sat in chairs of honor on the porch, watching the celebration with joy. Thomas had become a successful horse breeder, expanding on his father's business. Margaret's hotel was the finest in the territory. Henry had opened a school that educated children from all the surrounding ranches. Each of their children had built good lives, and each credited their parents' example of love and commitment as the foundation. As the sun set on that golden afternoon, Wade took Scarlett's hand and looked into her eyes, those green eyes that had captivated him from the first moment. "I would do it all again," he said softly. "Every moment, every challenge, every joy. I would do it all again just to end up here with you." Scarlett smiled, her face lined with age but still beautiful to Wade. "As would I, my love, as would I." They sat together as darkness fell and the stars came out, surrounded by the evidence of the life they had built together. A life that started with a diary in the dust and a kind stranger who stopped to return it. A life that proved love could bloom even in the harshest desert if it was tended with care and devotion. Wade Dalton had spent the first 25 years of his life drifting, and he had spent the decades since rooted in the love of one remarkable woman. And as he sat there holding Scarlett's hand under the Arizona stars, he knew he would not change a single moment of his journey. Because every step, every wrong turn, Every lonely night had led him exactly where he needed to be, home. Not just a place, but a person. Not just a town, but a family. Not just a house, but a legacy of love that would continue long after he and Scarlett were gone. The diary, that precious diary that had started everything, sat on the table beside them. It had been added to over the years, filled with the thoughts and memories of both Wade and Scarlett. And beneath it was a new diary, blank and waiting, ready to be given to the next generation so they could continue the story. Because that was what love did. It continued. It grew. It spread from person to person, heart to heart, generation to generation. And it all started when one man decided to stop and pick up a diary lying in the dust, when one woman dared to trust a stranger, when two lonely souls decided to take a chance on each other. As Wade and Scarlett celebrated with their family that evening, neither knew that they would have many more years together. They would live to see their great-grandchildren grow, would celebrate 60 years of marriage, would remain deeply in love until the very end. When Wade finally passed away at the age of 87, peaceful in his sleep with Scarlett beside him, he went knowing he had lived a full and meaningful life. He had loved and been loved. He had built something lasting. He had honored his promises and his commitments. He had been a good husband, father, grandfather, and great-grandfather. Scarlett grieved him deeply but found comfort in their children and the legacy they had built together. She lived another 3 years, filling her days with family and continuing to write in the diary that Wade had started so long ago. Her final entry, written just days before she died, said simply this: "I am ready to go now. Wade is waiting for me, and I have kept him waiting long enough. We found each other in the dust of an Arizona street, and we will find each other again, wherever souls go when they leave this earth." This has been the greatest love story ever told, at least to me. And it all started because a good man stopped to return a lost diary to a lonely woman. Thank you, Wade, for finding me. Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for loving me. I will love you forever and beyond. When Scarlett died peacefully in her sleep, surrounded by her children, the diary was passed to Thomas, the eldest. He kept it safe and eventually passed it to his own children, along with the story of how his parents had met and fallen in love. The diary became a family treasure, proof that love could happen in the most unexpected ways and last beyond death itself. Ash Fork continued to grow and change over the decades and eventually centuries. The boarding house, later hotel, stood for over 100 years before finally being replaced by a modern building. But a plaque was placed on the site, commemorating Wade and Scarlett Dalton and the love story that had begun there. The ranch remained in the family for generations, a testament to what could be built on a foundation of love and commitment. And somewhere in a dusty Arizona town, in a cemetery on a hillside, 2 headstones stand side by side. Wade Michael Dalton, beloved husband, father, and friend. Scarlett Rose Dalton, beloved wife, mother, and heart of our family. Between them, carved into the stone, are simple words that sum up their entire story. He found her diary in the dust. He returned it and asked to be part of her story. She said yes, and they wrote the rest together. It was the truest summary of their love that anyone could have written. A love that started with a small act of kindness and grew into something that lasted lifetimes. A love that proved that the right person, at the right moment, could change everything. A love that inspired generations to believe in the power of taking chances and opening hearts. The diary still exists, carefully preserved by the descendants of Wade and Scarlett Dalton. And sometimes, when family members gather and want to remember where they came from, someone will take out the old leather-bound book and read aloud the entries written by 2 people who found each other in the dust, and decided to build something beautiful together. Because that is what love does. It endures, it inspires, it continues, and it all starts when someone decides to stop and pick up what others might walk past. When someone decides that another person's lost treasure is worth returning. When someone dares to ask if they can be part of a story that is not yet finished being written. Wade stopped. Scarlett said yes. And together they wrote a love story for the ages, starting with nothing but a diary in the dust and ending with a legacy that would last forever. A legacy of love, commitment, kindness, and the courage to take a chance on the unknown. It was a simple beginning to an extraordinary life. But then again, the best love stories often start that way. With a small moment, a kind gesture, a willingness to see another person and value what they have lost. And from that small moment can grow something magnificent, something that changes not just 2 lives but countless lives to come. That was the gift Wade and Scarlett gave to each other and to everyone who knew them. The gift of believing that love was possible, that loneliness could be overcome, that 2 people could find each other even in the vastness of the frontier and build something that lasted. They proved it was not about grand gestures or perfect timing. It was about simple kindness, genuine connection, and the courage to ask if you could be part of someone's story. And when that someone says yes, when they invite you in and trust you with their heart, magic happens. Lives intertwine. Futures are rewritten. Loneliness transforms into belonging. And what starts as one person's story becomes a shared tale of love, adventure, and happily ever after. Wade and Scarlett's story ended as all mortal stories must, with death and separation. But the love they shared transcended those endings. It lived on in their children and their children's children. It lived on in the ranch and the hotel and the town they had helped build. It lived on in the diary that preserved their thoughts and feelings for future generations to discover. And most importantly, it lived on in the hearts of everyone who heard their story and dared to believe that they too might find love in unexpected places, might stumble upon their soulmate in the dust and debris of ordinary life, might take a chance on asking to be part of someone's story and hear the word yes. That was Wade and Scarlett's true legacy. Not just the family they created or the businesses they built, but the hope they inspired. The belief that love was always possible if you were brave enough to stop and help a stranger, kind enough to return what was lost, and courageous enough to ask to be part of something bigger than yourself. Their story began with a diary in the dust and ended with a love that transcended time itself. And in between was everything that made life worth living. Laughter and tears, challenges and triumphs, children and grandchildren, sunsets and starlight, and above all, love. Always love. Because in the end, that was all that truly mattered. Not the money or the property or the success, but the love they shared and the legacy of that love they left behind. A legacy that said love was worth fighting for, worth believing in, worth building a life around. Wade found Scarlett's diary in the dust. He returned it and asked to be part of her story. She said yes. And together, they proved that sometimes the greatest adventures begin with the smallest acts of kindness, and the deepest loves grow from the simplest beginnings. Their story was complete. Their love was eternal. And their legacy would inspire generations to come to believe in the power of love, the importance of kindness, and the magic that happens when 2 people decide to write their story together. The end of their mortal tale was just the beginning of their immortal legacy, preserved forever in ink and memory, and the hearts of everyone who believed that true love was possible, even in the harsh and unforgiving landscape of the Wild West, even in a struggling town in Arizona territory. even when the odds seemed impossible, because love does not need perfect circumstances. It just needs two people willing to take a chance on each other and commit to writing their story together, one day at a time, one moment at a time, one choice at a time. That was what Wade and Scarlett did. And in doing so, they created something that would outlast them both. A love story that proved happy endings were real, that lonely hearts could find each other. And that sometimes all it takes to change your entire life is stopping to pick up a diary lying in the dust and daring to return it to the woman who would become your everything. Their story was finished, but love stories like theirs never truly end. They just transform, becoming inspiration and hope for future generations. Becoming proof that love conquers all, that kindness matters, that taking chances can lead to extraordinary rewards. Wade and Scarlett Dalton lived fully, loved deeply, and left behind a legacy that would never be forgotten. And it all started with a diary in the dust, a kind stranger, and the simple question, "Can I be part of your story?" The answer was yes. And that yes changed everything.